Are depressions really caused by inflammation? Have scientists found the key to cure depressions? Already in 2013, there has been a quite provocative article in the journal BMC Medicine, in which was called, "So depression is an inflammatory disease, but where does inflammation come from?" So this article was provocative because it was said that obviously depression is caused by inflammations. There's no doubt about that. And we just have to figure out where the inflammations come from. This article, even today, is quite provocative because even though it could be found that in people with depression, inflammation markers are much higher than in healthy people, they are not elevated in all people. So even though inflammation might be the decisive factor for many people, it definitely isn't for all. But before we move on, before we take a look at what you can do against these inflammations and therefore against depression, let's take a look at what these inflammations actually are. What do scientists really mean if they talk about inflammations? Do they talk about the inflammation you have in your you get in your finger if there is a splinter and it gets red around your finger? Or do they talk about the inflammation you get if you have a bronchitis or tonsillitis, or if you have a sunburn? And actually, yes, of course you don't get depression if you have a splinter in your finger. But it's the same mechanism that runs through your body which finally causes your body to start the disease behavior. Which means that if your body realizes that there are more and more cytokines in your body, you start to get fever, maybe you are sweating, maybe there is some heat. That's why it's called inflammation. But some people also begin to have less hunger and they want to turn their back to everything and they would love to go into their bed and sleep all day long. And from an evolutionary point of view, it absolutely makes sense because your brain tells your body, well, it's better to hide, it's better to not go out in public, not to enjoy life now, because you first have to cure, you first have to get back your old strength. And to some degree, it's quite paradoxical that those mental disorders with which we have to fight nowadays the most, which are generalized anxiety disorders or other anxiety disorders and depression, seem to be the result of an overprotection of our body. Because our body says, don't go there, it's dangerous. Or he says, you first have to cure, we first have to beat the virus or the bacteria, and only then you can leave your cave and go out again, because then you can fight with all the potential enemies. So it all sounds quite logical. But just because something sounds logical, it doesn't mean it's right. So is there more evidence than, for example, that people with depression have higher inflammation? Actually, in the past years, there have been a lot of very interesting studies which could show that, for example, if you give people anti-inflammatory medications, like for example Celebrex, actually their depressive symptoms go down. It doesn't work with all anti-inflammatory medicine, but there seem to be some medications that actually work. Of course, those have some downsides as well, for example gut bleeding, and therefore it's not really the best way to treat depression. But there might be alternatives, like for example, doing sports. Because if we do sports, it could be shown as well that this helps to cope with inflammation. Another line of research could show that if people take antidepressants, classical antidepressants, like for example SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, those seem to have anti-inflammatory effects as well. Psychotherapy might have some anti-inflammatory effects as well. And that's something we will hear about in the future much more. some herbal medicines, like for example lavender or St. John's wort or Melissa officinalis or turmeric and its ingredient curcumin, all these herbal medicines, which could be shown that they also seem to improve depression and anxiety, also have anti-inflammatory effects. And last but not least, we of course can also influence the inflammatory markers in our body by what we eat. So if we eat a lot of sugar and high calorie diets, the junk food, this seems to cause strong inflammation. And actually some first studies could show if one group of people begins to eat more healthy, to use the Mediterranean diet with olive oil, with fish, with sugar-free dairy products, with legumes, with a lot of vegetables and fruits, those people actually, in comparison to control groups, experienced less depression. So it really becomes more and more clear that inflammation really seems to be a key factor for understanding depressions. And even though we don't have the perfect cure yet, it seems like that this knowledge could be of extreme value to cure depression, at least for some people in the future. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you want to, we'll see you next time.